Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty incredible, how a massive, world-changing entity started from absolutely nothing. I mean, we all know the retail giant today, right? The endless shipping containers, the warehouses that are literally the size of small towns, those instant deliveries that almost feel like magic. But every giant company has an origin, every decision has a consequence, and every single story has a lesson. So today, we're unpacking the foundational blueprint of an empire. It really makes you wonder, can one small garage actually become the birthplace of the world's biggest online store? It's a question that almost sounds like a cheesy Hollywood movie pitch, but the reality of that answer completely shapes the way our entire modern world shops, lives, and works today. So let's set the scene for a second. The year is 1994, and the reality was incredibly humble. Inside a small, super unassuming garage, one man was packing books by hand. There were no giant warehouses spanning millions of square feet. There were no massive fleets of blue delivery trucks filling up the highways. And there definitely weren't billions of dollars in capital waiting in the bank. It was just a standard computer, a few cheap wooden shelves, and one idea that frankly almost nobody believed could work. The audacity to try and build a universal store starting with absolutely zero infrastructure is exactly what makes this whole thing so fascinating. All right, let's jump into section 1, the garage genesis. Let's look at the timeline here because this pivot happened fast. In early '94, founder Jeff Bezos was a highly successful financial analyst working on Wall Street. But he stumbles upon this statistic about the explosive, unprecedented growth of the mid-90s internet. Web usage was just growing at an astronomical rate, and he quickly realized, okay, online commerce isn't just a passing fad, it is the inevitable future. So he takes a massive calculated risk, packs up, and moves to Seattle in late 1994. Now, why Seattle? Well, it was all about strategic proximity to major book distributors and an emerging hub of tech talent. And why start with books? Because they were easy to ship, universally standardized, and they had a vast global catalog that no physical brick-and-mortar store could ever dream of holding. And by 1995, those very first book orders started rolling in. Moving right along to Section 2, early startup struggles. The physical and mental grind behind the scenes here was intense. Just imagine the harsh sound of packing tape ripping at 2 in the morning, or praying, literally praying that your screeching dial-up internet wouldn't drop a customer's order. You had this tiny team kneeling on the floor, packing books by hand on hard concrete, working straight through the night. To save cash, they famously built their first desks out of cheap wooden doors bought directly from Home Depot. They operated on extremely limited money, battled constant technical glitches, and faced agonizingly slow initial growth. But most importantly, they were fighting massive customer skepticism. Remember, back then, people were absolutely terrified to put their credit card numbers into a computer. So every single order that successfully came through felt like a monumental, hard-won victory.
And out of those very physical struggles, their core philosophy was born: customer obsession. Because every single customer was so incredibly hard to win, that tiny garage team learned to value them above everything else. This wasn't just some corporate buzzword slapped on a break room poster. It was a literal survival tactic. A relentless focus on the customer's needs, their convenience, and their experience was prioritized way above the competitors and way above short-term profits, right from day one. This exact mindset became the company's ultimate North Star. Once they nailed that customer experience and finally gained trust, the floodgates suddenly opened.
Which brings us to Section 3, rapid growth and expansion. The momentum leaped forward at just a dizzying pace. I mean, they outgrew that initial garage so fast. The company started aggressively expanding its inventory way beyond just books. They moved into CDs, electronics, toys, the whole shebang. They secured massive investments as the manic excitement of the dot-com boom really took hold of the global economy. And they went on an absolute tear, hiring top-tier talent, totally overhauling their technology infrastructure, and rapidly expanding into massive new physical warehouses across the country. Almost overnight, this scrappy startup achieved global recognition. It was an era of limitless possibility and hypergrowth. But, as you'll see, the higher the climb, the steeper the fall. That leads us straight into Section 4, the dot-com crisis. The contrast here is stark and honestly pretty jarring. On one side, you have the bright heights of the boom: endless warehouse expansion, massive hiring sprees, and global praise. And then, on the exact opposite side, the bust. When the dot-com bubble finally burst, a cold, harsh reality set in. Investor fear was rampant. The company was bleeding money, suffering massive financial losses. Critical analysts were openly mocking them on financial news networks, loudly questioning if the company would even survive the year. It was a dark, existential crisis with intense pressure on the entire leadership team. So put yourself in those shoes. How do you lead when the entire world is telling you you're doomed? Well, despite immense, paralyzing uncertainty and deafening criticism, Bezos and his team remained completely focused. While the media and investors panicked, the internal heartbeat of the company stayed remarkably steady. They didn't panic pivot. They didn't abandon their core model. Instead, they just tuned out the noise from the analysts and focused entirely on the one thing they could actually control, the customer, which perfectly sets the stage for one of the greatest business pivots in modern history. Let's dive in to Section 5, the ultimate comeback. This right here is the architectural blueprint of the modern empire we know today. 5 massive pillars completely reinvented their business model. First up, AWS, where they realized they could rent out their massive computing infrastructure to other companies, essentially inventing modern cloud computing. Then, Prime, which turned shipping into a subscription model that locked in just unprecedented customer loyalty. Marketplace allowed third-party sellers to scale on their platform. The Kindle, which completely revolutionized how humanity reads. And finally, an unparalleled global logistics network. Actually, scratch that. They didn't just expand. They completely stopped being a regular store and transformed into the actual infrastructure for the digital economy. And the secret ingredient fueling all of those giant leaps? Long-term thinking. That became their absolute greatest competitive advantage. They didn't build AWS or Prime to make a quick buck by the next financial quarter. They built them knowing it might take a full decade to actually pay off. They fully embraced the incredible patience required to just be misunderstood by the public and investors for long periods of time. Wrapping things up with Section 6, Core Business Lessons. So, why does this all matter to us? Well, here are 4 foundational, actionable takeaways for literally any project, career, or business you're building right now. Step 1. Think long-term. Do not sacrifice a massive future vision for a tiny present gain. Step 2, obsess over customers. Focus your energy on the people actually paying you, not the competitors chasing you. Step 3, take calculated risks. Leaving a secure Wall Street job to sell books on a nascent internet was wild for sure, but it was backed by undeniable data. And step 4, innovation requires patience. True breakthroughs take time to mature. These aren't just corporate values, guys. They're a universal blueprint for building anything meaningful. Behind every successful company is a story of bold decisions, unexpected failures, and the courage to begin again. The next time a package magically appears on your doorstep, remember the cold concrete floor of that 1994 garage. And it leaves us with one essential question to ponder. If an empire can be built from a handful of books in a tiny room, what could you build with the resources you have sitting right in front of you today? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.